Welcome to Wakey. Wakey, Asenia here with co-host Jenica Haywood. And tonight we are diving into time and the three forces. We got a little bit of fuck it energy going on tonight, so we're just gonna run with that. Diving right into the wonky, little bit of wonky energy flowing about. Seems to be collective and otherwise. I'm just plugging myself with that and otherwise because I have not been in flow for probably a good day or so. And I can tell you why. Because I'm not using time properly. This is maybe going to spin some heads around, but I don't know how many people understand that time has more than one state. So we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about the three different states of flow. The nature of time is that flow has three different states. It's active, it's passive, and it's neutral. So our flow state is determined by how we spend our time. So if you are spending your time in the active, you are giving mentally, you are producing mentally, you are teaching, you are guiding, you are leading. This is all mentally out. And if you're being passive in your use of time, you are taking in information, you are absorbing, you are listening, you are learning, and this is all mentally in. Now, if you are in a passive state and you are learning, you are being shown something, you are learning from someone or from something, but neutral time is going to be different than that. You can be shown, but you are being shown what you could not otherwise learn or be taught. This is the divine state of neutral. This is the neutral state of time, a neutral aspect of using time where you're not giving anything out mentally and you're not taking anything in. So we could call it, a meditative state. We could call it a lot of different things, but one of the things that we call it in the work is the neutral state. Not mentally in, not mentally out. That's neutral. So let's talk about some examples because I feel like we just dumped a whole bunch of information right into everyone's lap and it's like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
what do you mean? So what would you say, what would be like your favorite thing, Jen? Active state, active use of time. What would you first thing on your list? You've got to be active. What's your go-to?
Ooh. If I'm specifically choosing to be in an active state, which I think a lot of the time I find myself in an active state without intentionally being there. Um, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like I guess journaling is kind of one of those areas where I'm like actively like pulling things out and putting them on paper. But I'm actually not entirely sure if
Yeah.
that's I feel like that one's probably
Truly
not a
depends on
clear
what you're
example.
yeah, it's a little bit nuanced that one because it depends on what you're doing. Like if you're automatic writing, if you're sitting down with a notebook and you are doing the kind of journaling that some people would call meditative, that would be
hmm
neutral,
hmm
right? But like if you're writing, like if you're story writing, that's active all day long.
hmm Or like planning, like not planning, but like really it's
Like
it's
vision
not,
casting.
yes. Yeah. More like a vision casting, more like a pulling in all of the stuff that seems to like just stay in my head and being like, hey, let's get this down on paper and let's like pull it into something that's more tangible and bring it into like this kind of something that I
Almost
can
like
work with.
brainstorming.
Yeah, brain dumping, brainstorming. Again, not automatic writing. That is a different state of flow. Like
Yeah.
that's why I'm like,
Yeah.
maybe this isn't the clearest example, but ironically, or not ironically, I tend to find myself most dominantly in a passive state as opposed to
Really.
active. hmm Yeah, yeah. I mean, I massage for a living, which is not necessarily active. You would think it would be active because I'm being active, but that kind of like I'm doing something, but I'm also in a state of like receiving as well and working in energies that's not necessarily like actively putting things out there. I'm not teaching them, I'm not doing anything, but like there's a I don't know. I've been playing around with what it is that happens when I'm massaging. But because it's not clearly
There's an
active, like
exchange. I'm picking that up. Like you're
mhm,
talking about an exchange that's happening between you and the client.
that's
Like
unspoken.
you're reading their energy. Like you're locked in.
Hmm.
You're locked into their energy field. I
Hmm.
feel like that's still really active. Like it's calling on your gifts to produce, to not even produce isn't even the right word, to perform. There is
Hmm.
a performance happening within you,
But there's
and that feels
also
very active to me.
love that. I actually really love the turn that this conversation has taken because it's not a mentally active. And I know that like in the definition that
Yeah.
was just given, inactive, it's a mentally out thing. So you think of, again, like you said, teaching, speaking, doing things where you're pulling on a knowledge to then share and express. And in massage, that's not, it's a very different kind of active. It's more of like, I almost want to say like emotional active, like, or physical, in the way that like it's not coming from any sort of thing intellectually. So intellectually, I'm more in the passive receiving end, but I'm giving through what I'm receiving. So yes, very active physically because I'm obviously physically active when I'm massaging, but I also find
Yeah.
myself in a state of flow that doesn't take a lot of mental thinking of what it is that I'm going to say or teach or how I'm going to
That's
structure
the important
this
part. That's the important part. That what you just said, and I couldn't even regurgitate what you just said. What did you say? Do you recall?
with the part of like I'm not actively pulling in like what it is I'm going to think about and
Yes.
then express, but
Yes. Yes.
instead
That.
it's very different. It's not engaging my intellectual mind. It did in the beginning, as I was a new therapist learning these different moves, but as I've been, as I've excelled and it's become second nature, but even beyond second nature, it's really gotten into these deeper layers of again receiving information from their body energetic field, what this exchange that goes far beyond just physically manipulating muscles and connective tissue. um there's a real deeper level of reception and engagement that goes on that surpass. I don't need my mental thinking mind for it anymore. It's so much more of the exchange physically. I don't even know. This is it's I know
You're
we wanted
speaking
clear
to that.
examples, but
Yeah, no, but you're speaking to that aspect of it that people really need to understand. And just in hearing this conversation and being like, wait a minute, what do you mean we can use time three different ways? It really has to do with how you're showing up in that use of time. So, like that example that you just gave, in comes crashing the same analogy with the dancer, right? You
mm,
have a seasoned dancer who's been dancing the foxtrot since she was 3, right? And this 40-year-old woman, let's just say, has danced the fox she's danced the foxtrot her entire life. She's been dancing this highly complicated dance, right, for a very long time. That's not going to put her in an active state anymore because her body wisdom is taking over. The same way sometimes we drive ourselves home and pull into the driveway and go, whoa, well, I don't remember that, right? The body
mhm,
takes over.
mhm.
Versus brand new dancer could have someone else learning that very same dance standing right next to her, but who has never danced before a day in their life. And that is passive all day long because you have to learn it. You have to think about the steps. You have to think about what you're going to be doing. That person is going to be learning and then becoming active, passive, active, passive, active, passive, active. Whereas someone who has been doing that dance their entire life, who's seasoned and whose body understands the steps, they don't even have to think about it anymore, would be able to dance the foxtrot in neutral.
Hmm. Well, it's interesting too, because as you say that, like, as you're explaining this, I was thinking about the whole, driving your car home and not remembering it, but recognizing that like your mind was somewhere else in the clouds thinking about whatever.
Yeah.
It's interesting because in this experience, that's not what happens. It's almost like my intellectual mind is on idle, waiting, because at times there is an engagement of like, oh, that's something that keyed me in that then is going to bring me closer into focus and then back into the body. Like it sits in idle in a way,
It's like
waiting.
active, neutral, active, neutral, active, neutral, not passive anymore. You're not having to learn the movement. You're just like,
Mm-mm.
this is going to be a funny analogy, but it's kind of like the mom who can just hear the chatter from the kids in the next room and really only is listening for like, ouch, knife, blood, like whatever the keyword is that like action
Certain
is
sounds.
required. And until that point, you can just tune it out. It's just background noise. It doesn't require anything.
No, that's perfect because it does. It's like it's so engaging and so fulfilling because I'll be in just like what my body knows to do, this engagement that's happening beyond the intellectual mind, but then when it does come in, it's like this engagement of like, okay, we're gonna do work around this differently. Like, okay, shoulder blades got something specific going on here. We're gonna engage and try different moves, try to move it different ways, and like then I'm zeroed in on it, and that's 100% active. Like that is all I'm focused on. And then once that resolves and gets, neutralized, for lack of a better word, then I can move on and I get back into the flow of this engagement, just body to body, of this physical touch. And again, then my mind's back into this idle state. And emotional centers very much idle. There is a non-engagement emotionally, like at all, in massage because
There's nothing
there's
for you to
just
like or dislike.
yeah, there's just no emotional attachment to anything. Yeah, there's not even an engagement. Like I, yeah, I could go into that part further, but just in the sense of like how these actions turn into neutral time, how passively learning stuff. I find myself, like I said this earlier, I find myself in the passive state pretty dominantly, largely because when I'm choosing to use my time in a particular way, most of the time it's reading, it's listening to podcasts, it's learning more about something that interests me. It's when I have free time, that's typically how I'm spending it. Even when it comes to like meditation, which I think is a really important one to kind of categorize because there is a neutral meditation that I'll put myself in where there's just a beingness. And then there's also the passive meditation where I'm going in and putting myself in a state of relaxation for the goal of clarity. But there's still a goal, there's still something to be learned, there's something that I'm desiring to achieve or not achieve, to receive. Again, that passive receptivity, that wanting to
That would
take
still
in
be neutral.
information. Really
That would still be neutral. Yeah. Yeah, if you
interesting.
can learn it, if you can learn it from a book or from a person or from anywhere in this worldly world, it'd be passive.
Okay.
If you have to be shown because you can't learn it anywhere else, that's really that inner world receptivity that you're talking about. So I would
Hmm.
recategorize that in your mind's eye or otherwise just as generally neutral. Because if you're being
That's
shown, if you're being led to see or led to understand in a new way, like all of that, I really do
yes.
see it, the deep inner reception. That's going to be neutral every time.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's so
Yeah.
intriguing just again just to recategorize that, like you said, recategorize it in my mind because as I was first learning about the neutral, the passive, and the active states, that time works through, the three areas of time, I felt as though I struggled finding the neutral time, and that I spent most of my time in passive until I needed to actively do something which I was normally called upon to do through my external life influences, be it work, be it, needing to go out and get groceries, these things that like we
Yeah.
find ourselves being really active, but being a person who tends to go, who doesn't spend most of my time in the doingness, but really in more of that reception. Yeah, it just really interesting to recategorize that and recognize how I am spending my time truly, and that there is that these lines are so nuanced, and they're so, again, like, it's at one point you're in the passive and you're learning, but even my job at this point in time, touching on massage therapy, but then I can even bring in the housekeeping and running a B&B side where, like, yeah, there was some learning that took place, and now cleaning largely is just my body going through its, what knows, knowing what to do, until again I need my mind to engage because something's different, because something needs a little extra attention, because keeping a list in my mind of like, okay, I
Yeah.
gotta go through these different things. um but then
Yeah.
I've also considered that passive if I've got a podcast in my
Mm.
ear, or if I've got music in my ear,
Yes.
so
Yes. Yes.
it's like,
If you're taking something in while you're doing it.
uh-huh,
Yeah. Yeah.
which
Like if
really
you're mopping
was,
the floor, but you have a podcast in your ears, that's passive. If you're just mopping the floor, if you're just mating socks, or if you're just doing dishes, nothing in your ear, you're not taking anything in mentally, then it's neutral.
which just recently I also had to redefine, because a lot of the time I will put on some sort of melodic, methodical music that has no words and nothing to follow. It's just something that, something to help it so my mind's not just like doing weird things, like putting random music in my head that I haven't heard in 10 years, or like that. Recognizing when it's just kind of doing its thing and it's almost driving me crazy, because I'm like, oh my gosh, this song is still in my head. It'll kind of help bring me down into that idle state again, like I said, like this state of I'm not focused on anything, but I'm not imagining, and I'm not
Yeah.
thinking about the next day, or what I've got to do, or again just a random song that just kind of keeps playing on repeat, that I'm like, okay, I can't I can't make another bed just having my mind do these weird loops of different songs. Like, so I'll put on this melodic music that doesn't have anything to follow or think about or take in. And as we were talking last time, like, that is still a neutral state, because it's been my way of helping to train myself to bring my mind back into an idle state, especially when it's stimulated. I'm running around the house doing a bunch of different things on a time frame, so I'm stimulated.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
actively doing stuff, so it doesn't necessarily kick into that meditative side without a little bit of help, at least in my process. But I feel
Yeah.
like this has been a really like a really great way to exemplify how clear and nuanced it is when you find yourself in it in your regular day-to-day life, in trying to determine, is this active, is this passive, where's my neutral time, what how do I
Yeah.
achieve the neutral time, especially given that how frequently can I just lay down and take myself to that neutral meditative space. I love it when I can, but when there's a list of
Yeah.
things going on, it's like you can still find neutral time in the things you're doing.
Oh, 100%. And sometimes it's just going to mean taking the earbuds out and being like, okay, we've done enough learning today. I know my mind is feeling really active. I'm feeling stimulated, whatever it is. Opportunities to practice that like controlled thought. Because I think we talked about this last time, did we not? Like the three different aspects that are in each of the three lower centers. We've got the mechanical aspect, the reactive aspect, and the controlled aspect. So where thought's concerned, you're going to have mechanical thoughts where you look at something and it gets your attention and now you're thinking about it. That's very mechanical, right? That happens all the time. Or something, someone says something that triggers a thought, completely different thing that's happening there. Like it's a reactivity. It's almost like it's the emotional aspect of the thinking center where you're like, no, she didn't say that to me. This is what I think about that, not what you think, and now here we're off, we're being reactive with our thoughts. But that controlled aspect, that focused aspect, you could utilize that intentional focus to quiet the mind.
Which is
we've got to
really
we've got to
freaking hard.
exercise that aspect if we're going to do like meditation or anything like that. We've got to be able to control our focus, for sure. I was just looking at the comments in the chat.
Yeah, I love this question, honestly. So how do you manage
Managing
the
the balance
balance?
between, yeah, managing the balance between the different aspects of time. It really is one of those, I'll say in the beginning of this work, it was for me more difficult to track. And it wasn't like I'm keeping a journal and going, okay, I had 20 minutes of passive time. Now I got to have 20 minutes of no, like it's not like that at all. But when we came on, I was speaking to this because I have had this feeling for about the last day and a half that I am more irritable than normal. I've not, let me clarify this because it's a little weird to even talk about. I have not been triggered. I have not had an outburst. I have not had, but I can feel it. I can feel this
Friction?
friction. Yeah. And I was almost going to say like an energy leak, but it doesn't even feel like that. It doesn't feel like I'm leaking energy. It feels like I'm giving away energy that's actually meant for me, like that I'm meant to reserve for myself. Um, to redirect it, to transmute it on my own versus giving it away. It's been a maybe a solid week here on the homestead of give, do, animals being born, things taking place, new processes coming into the flow of the day to day, and like a rearrange of life, basically, right? Like who doesn't experience that? We've all got that going on to some degree in one way, shape, form, or fashion. Like everyone can relate to that, right? Something happens in life, whether you planned for it to happen or not. This we did plan to have happen, but at the same time, it doesn't all feel that way, even when you have that plan, like I knew when we bought goats, these goats are going to have babies. And one day I'm going to be rearranging my life around these babies to go into a new flow. Well, it's here. And I can feel the way that my energy has been redirected over the last week. And it's maybe just been literally a day and a half that I am feeling and coming into this awareness that I have not been as diligent as I was in the beginning. This is goat mama number 2. So the first time around, I was literally talking to myself, going, okay, now remember, you've got time for yourself, you've got time for the animals, you've got time, you're right. Like, and I was structuring things for myself with that first goat mama in a way that I haven't been with the second. And I think I just got comfortable. I just got comfortable in that first flow, and I'm like, we got this under control, right? But it's still new. And I can still feel that friction coming in of like new schedules, new processes, new things happening. Like,
New
and there is that,
responsibilities.
yeah, it's like learning to swim long distance and then swimming long distance and actually doing the marathon and being like, okay, we trained for this, but I still have to really put my focus into like keeping my stroke and my form and my, you know, actually doing the thing you've been training to do. So I will say that got away from me a little bit this week. And I can feel it. I can feel it in my energy field. I can feel the way that I have not spent the amount of time I would typically spend caring for myself, and stands to reason because I've been caring for so many other things. So there's been that real in my own face awareness, realization that I have got to reevaluate how I'm spending my time. I've got to reevaluate how literally what am I doing during the time that I'm spending, whether it's with the animals or in the car, or, and this is the question from the chat, it's like, how do we balance between this when it's nuanced? And especially when life does what life does and it just starts lifing, right? Well, you've got to bring your awareness back to how you're spending your time, really, and simply you do. You've got to bring your awareness back to how often are you really getting neutral time. And let's be really clear here, neutral time is going to be the most often forgotten because it is the least known. What's the first thing we're going to usually forget? Neutral time, because people do not understand what that means. To have, what do you mean not doing anything? Because that's what it sounds like. What do you mean I'm supposed to sit and do nothing? What do you mean? Nothing mentally in, nothing mentally out. Well, what do I do? It's like nothing.
Well,
You do nothing.
and then
You
there's
you have
always
time to receive, but you have time to just be neutral. To let yourself not do, to let yourself not put out information or take in information, which, like you said, you spoke to it. You're like, this is what I would normally do if I have time by myself. I would normally pick something to do. Like, what do I want to read? What do I want to learn? What do I want to watch? What do I want to like?
like,
I know
oh,
you as
finally.
much as I am a learner. Like, you want to pick something up, learn something new, read something new, listen to something new. And I really have to remind myself that, man, this just goes so deep, even on a personal level. It's valuable, but when you look at like business and consider that how you spend your time in your business dictates the flow of your business, and that there's those same three states exist in how you spend your time in business, just like they do in personal. So imagine on a personal level, I'm just doing nothing but learning, learning, never doing anything else, not ever taking any neutral time, not getting enough active time, just learning. What's going to happen to me personally? When am I being creative? When am I sitting with myself and really knowing myself? I'm just doing nothing but taking in information.
You're not even using
That's
that
going to cause a
information.
massive imbalance on a personal level. The same way it would if you were taking it up a scale to the business level.
Say that one more time.
So let's flip it, because it doesn't even have to be passive. You could say, well, I've just been working my business. I've just been working my business like crazy and I'm not getting anywhere. I've just been working, doing this, doing that, launching this, launching that, doing all this, creating new sales pages and doing all this active, and not seeing results. Same thing's happening. You're slow. You can't just be active all the time, just like you can't just be passive all the time. Just like you can't just be neutral all the time. They inform each other. You take in, and the information you learn informs your active time, informs your neutral time, informs your passive time, informs your active time, informs your neutral time. It's like they have this symbiotic relationship where they're imprinting and influencing each other.
Yeah, and I
Whether we're
feel
talking
like,
business or we're talking personal.
yes. And I feel like it's almost more difficult when you start looking at business, because business, especially in this kind of economy and lifestyle, so much of business is go, 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 go. Do more, do more, do more, reach for more. Like, don't ever stop. Like, if you really want to achieve something, like, never give up on it. Like, there's so much of this drive of the do, always doing, make that extra call, send that extra email. Like, there's so much of this focus on the more you do, the more successful you'll be. And I love that this throws a huge wrench in that because of the law of three, this cosmic law of three different forces that time works within or is. And those be you cannot, you will get so imbalanced in one of them that it will throw everything off, and it's an impossible thing to, you won't be able to achieve something that is long-term sustainable without the other two. It's just not, it will get,
Mm-mm.
not without developing something that's not not desirable along with it as well. Um, but another question in the chat says, so is neutral time processing time? I mean, I would say yes
To a
and
degree.
no. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Because you can be like over processing, analysis paralysis. Now we've got overactive mind. Thinking, worrying, all of that. Throw that out the window. Throw that out the window. Sit with something. If you can call that processing, to sit with something, to just be and process through impartially, now we're neutralizing. We're in neutral time. You're likely going to be shown something that you wouldn't have otherwise been able to learn in that processing time. And that's what that neutral is all about.
That's what I was gonna like pinpoint, is like if you can recognize that through the processing it's more of like a settling in with everything that's been happening or going on or what you've been learning or putting out there, but like recognizing that there's probably something that you won't be able to learn, see, or figure out through the active or passive, and that that's part of your processing time of like allowing something that is not in your current awareness to come through, if in whatever way. And again, I also want to stress, this isn't a seeking out of, you're not actively seeking something. I feel like that's one of the main ways people use meditation, is to drop in and go looking for answers, go, what does my higher self have to say? Or I'm gonna, do this visual thing so that I can find my inner whatever. Like, that's still very active. That's not in a reception space. And that's also not a passive reception of learning. It's more of that spaciousness to allow whatever processing to take place, to allow space to expand, and to allow any new information to come in a different way, in a way that you wouldn't have been able to dictate.
Yeah, because if you know what you're looking for and you go looking for it, how much are you going to miss while you're looking for some specific thing? Meanwhile, tuning out everything that isn't that. That word spaciousness that you use smacked. That had a nice ring to it.
I think that's key in everything, which only speaks to how often the neutral force is forgotten, because we fill our
Mm-hmm.
spaces in time so ardently, so so readily. That's what I'm saying, in my own observation of recognizing that when I have space in time, I naturally move to fill it, especially when it's busy all the time. And now, oh, I've got open space. What can I do with it? Immediately go to something that is intriguing to me, desirable to me, learning something, like it's a bringing in of information. I immediately fill that space. And it's only in that space that new things can really come through. And so I've been learning to transition my passive time, filling my spaces, filling the space and time with something else to consume, to, bring into my awareness, and instead allow it to be that space, allow that space to exist without me needing to fill it with something, or find the next thing that's on the list that I need to do because I need to take advantage of all of my time, but instead let it be its spaciousness. And whether that's sitting in meditation or not at all, like not meditation, but again, capitalizing on the spaciousness by leaving it there. I feel like that's honestly something that's quite can bring what feels like magic forward because you do
Mm.
get downloads or insights or thoughts that just kind of bing that then change your perspective on what you're doing in business or brings in the
Yeah.
ahas or again it informs your other two ways of spending time, but we're just so quick to fill it, we're so quick to forget about needing that time not pre-filled, not predetermined,
I
not
love
pre.
that you use the word magic too. I do. I love that you use the word magic because that's truly what we're talking about. I feel like it's just so vastly misunderstood. The idea of using time and using these states of time. The nature of time is that it has three different flow states. And if we know how to utilize them and when to utilize them in any given process, now we're talking magic. Truly.
I'm very careful where I
I
use
love
that
this.
word.
Yeah,
Just
I know,
because
but
of
this is
that.
one of those places that you can use that
Well,
word.
I did intentionally use it. I was thinking about it and I'm like, no, that is what comes from this.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's the authentic, legitimate thing that does create what we do perceive as magic in a way that's not
the
got my
active or the
hands all up
will.
in it. Yes.
Uh-huh. The active, willful aspect would be white magic. The denying or passive aspect would be black magic. And then the surrender or sacrifice, that's red. This is what's crazy. Okay, so we just pinpointed our next podcast episode. Thanks,
Yes.
everybody.
I was
Because we're gonna dive into magic next. Uh maybe this is where we end today.
Yeah, that red magic, as we're talking about neutral. I've been reading Mary Magdalene and just about this red thread that
Oh yeah.
moves through time in a totally different way.
Hmm.
Mull around
Yep.
on these three forces and experiment with those and come back next week with us to talk about how they coincide with magic.
I love it.
Yes.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you, Jenica. Beautiful, beautiful conversation about time and the three forces. And we have rolled out this beautiful red carpet for ourselves for next week already.
Oh
Look at
yeah,
us go.
I love it. Um, yeah, where to drop questions for
Questions for
next week.
next week. I see a question in the chat. So, questions for next week can be dropped in the Snaps community for sure. And if you're listening and you're not part of the Snaps community, first things first, get your butt in there. Second would be you could comment underneath this YouTube video because this will be on YouTube if you're listening to it, and leave us a question. Leave us any kind of question. Specifically, if it's for next week, you want to drop it in the Synapse community. Since who knows what the date will be when this goes on YouTube, I don't know. I don't know, but it'll be up there before too long. It'll be up and posted.
Yeah, there's always the free community in
Yeah, next,
Facebook too, the Akashic Kitchen. Yeah.
yes,
Good. You'll be a little bit more up to date
yeah,
there, but really the Synapse community is if this conversation is seriously piquing your interest and something is like you're just feeling the pull, there's so much value being pushed into the Synapse community. Like just join us there and your mind will be blown.
Yes, yes. I'm loving that space more and more by the day.
Yeah, me too. Sweet.
All right, that's it for today then. This has been
Yes.
fantastic. Thank
Thank
you
you
all for
for,
joining us for Wakey
yeah.
Weekly. We'll see you inside the Synapse community if you're taking that dive, and if not, you can catch us inside the Akashic Kitchen. Links for both will be dropped below this video in YouTube so that you can come find us.
Yes.
Thank
See
you.
you there.
All right, that's it, and we'll see you next week.